Hi there, everybody, and welcome. It's great to have you here for our next version of the Hack Planner Workshop. How's everybody's day 5 going at Global Hack Week? Hope well. Yeah, so let me go ahead and share our slides for the day. I wanted to start off by giving a recap of what we did on day 3. And so that's what we're going to do in the first portion of this um, of these slides. And just in the chat, were you here on day 3? I would love to hear if you were, but if you weren't, hopefully this is a good review. So last time we worked on rebuilding our Hack Planner app, but using a different web framework or a different framework in general. And so we're using React for the front end of our website and Node.js for the back end. Marie says, missed day 3. That's okay. I'm so glad you're here for day 4. And yeah, that's why we do these reviews, so that everybody can catch up. So first, I wanted to reiterate, what is React? Some of you have never used React before. Others may have used it a lot. Oh, sorry, I forgot to send the check-in link. Thank you for reminding me about this, Tanaksh. Let me go ahead and get that for all of you. Just give me 1 second while I pull that up. It actually, yeah, sometimes just slips my mind, unfortunately. But let me go ahead and send that to you right now. Oh, I almost sent you the part 3 link. That would have been embarrassing. This check-in links come in the email. That is true. You can get the check-in link in your email. But in case you don't want to check that, or maybe you just didn't get the email for whatever reason, here's the link one more time. It's in the chat. Just copy it into your web browser and go to this address. Yeah, checking in is a really important step because it helps us understand who's interested in what sorts of content at Global Hack Week, so that we can kind of tailor our offerings that way. And yeah, it also is good for you because it can maybe get you some swag at the end of Global Hack Week. You never know. So yeah, that's the link for check-in. By the way, I also forgot to send a link to our slides for the day. So let me send the link to the slides in the chat as well. Here's the link to the slides. And this is a Google document presentation. And you should be able to follow along with our slides for today. Today, we started at slide 72. So go ahead with that. And so I think we'll cause this. Can I ask a personal question? Maybe you could ask me a personal question in some kind of Discord or something like that. But maybe for the stream, we'll just keep it a little bit more related to the workshop. All right. So anyway, with React, this is where we're starting off for the day. And it's basically a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. And so, yeah, it's developed by Meta and used in web development. And so, one of the main concepts in React is the concept of a virtual DOM. So, when we say virtual DOM, we're referring to what is called the document object model. And it's a good way to organize your front end in a way that you can piece it together however you'd like. And that goes to the next bullet point, which is about component-based architecture. So you might hear people ask about components. Components, it's really, a sort of unique feature of React, and it promotes reusability and modularity. And components manage their own state, which means that you can adjust the values, properties of one component in the project without affecting any of the others. And they're also composed. Sorry, I had to sneeze there for a second, but yeah, they can be used in conjunction with other libraries and frameworks and are really popular these days. So yeah, it's great that we are getting some experience in React. With Node.js, this is our backend here for the project today. And Node.js is a JavaScript runtime that is built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. And similar to modules, that's exactly right. It's exactly the same. So this allows you to run JavaScript code outside of a web browser. And yeah, Node.js is event-driven and non-blocking. And what that means is that Node.js will allow you to execute certain code upon an event happening. And it will not block other aspects of the I/O model from running when it does so. So let's say it has to wait for a response from some kind of service. It will not prevent the project from executing the rest of the code. So yeah, in this case, on the bottom here, it gives some examples of where you might want to use Node.js, and it's widely used for building web servers, APIs, and microservices. And we are basically using this for serving our web app. So it would go into that category. And just to also emphasize, NPM is our node package manager. It's the way that we can install new dependencies for Node.js. So yeah, it's a really powerful combination, this React and Node.js stack. So we are going to now move to the implementation of the Hack Planner for React frontend and Node.js backend. And first was the setup for Node.js. So you'll remember this from yesterday if you attended, but if you didn't, now's a great time to follow along with these steps. And this is on slide 81. It's how you can install Node.js. So I'll just breeze through this to not spend too much time on it. But if anyone wants us to pause and run through this setup together, I'm totally happy to do so. Let me just send through these. And so these are all of the different terminal commands that you'll do to set up the React aspect of your project. Just pausing here on this npm install Axios command. Axios is how you sort of perform routing in React. So you can sort of make a post request, get request, things like that using Axios. And so we imported several things into our project. I just explained Axios being a way you can send a post, put, get, things of that nature, requests. But now I want to explain useEffect and useState, which are these two packages that we imported in the first line here. So this is really important. So I'm just going to emphasize it again today in our recap. That useState is a React hook for managing state in functional components. And so, you can declare state variables and their initial values, and it will actually return two different things. First, a current state value. So that would be just how you would get the value at any given time is by calling that current state value. And then also it returns a setter function, which is a function object. And you can pass along a new value to the function, and it will update the value of count or the value of the current state. And so here's our example where we use count and set count. And so we're calling the function useState. We're calling this hook, and we're setting the default value to 0. So the default value of count would then be 0. And you could easily set count to 1, 2, anything you wanted to, really. And so that would be how the useState works. And you might ask, why do we do it this way? Why do we do it in this functional way? Well, it allows us to enable interactive features and in a simpler way. So by having these set count function and having a function to update values, it's simplifying your management of your states in the functional components. And so let's imagine you wanted to change the value of something. It's easier to do that when you have a function versus figuring out what the scope is of some particular variable, updating it here, and not knowing not knowing where it is somewhere else. So that's why it's so preferred to use functional programming technique for state management in React. And Roshan says, I like both React and Node. They go hand in hand. Absolutely true. I totally agree. And so that's why we chose to use them today for the session. The second hook that we have implemented in our project is called the useEffect hook. So the useEffect hook is a React hook for handling side effects in functional components. So what that means is, you might wonder, what's a side effect? Well, it means that you're able to perform a particular action the same way every time. And it's after rendering or when some dependencies change. And so by default, it will run after every render. And here's an example of an effect that you could have. You could have, when you render the home page, a pop-up that encourages you to subscribe to the website. And that could be implemented using useEffect. Another one, which we're going to do today, is actually doing a read or a GET request. So we're going to read all of the tasks onto the screen when we load the home page of our checklist. And so it's going to run after every render by default. And so you could write useEffect and then an arrow and then these curly braces. And inside of the curly braces is where you put the first argument of useEffect, which is a function containing the side effect logic. So you could write a function that does any kind of logic in the application. And the second argument, which is an optional one, is the array of dependencies that could trigger the effect. So we could specify some dependency that we want to trigger our useEffect logic. And so there are some common use cases on the bottom here, like fetching data, subscribing, unsubscribing. So we could have event listeners that are listening for those things to happen and then trigger useEffect. But actually, by default, an empty dependency array will run the effect only once when you render. And so, yeah, this is a really good way of using a hook to execute logic once, or as a side effect, as they say in React. All right. And someone asks, is there a place where I can access slides of all past sessions? If yes, can you please share the link? Thank you. Yeah, there is actually. I'll share that link with you right now. The current slideshow that we have is a deck of every day's slides. So you should have no trouble finding out where all of that stuff is. Thanks for that question. Gaming School coming in with great help there. This is a great place to find our previous streams at YouTube. And actually, we have them not just for Global Hack Week this July, but also for Global Hack Weeks from every year and every month. So yeah, check them out. So first, we're going to start off by defining the use states. And that's the first thing we did on day 3. We defined 2 different ones, items, and that was to record the tasks that we have, and new item, which is to record any updates, changes, additions to the list. And then we implemented our CRUD operations on the client side. So you might remember CRUD, the acronym, create, read, update, delete. You might remember that from one of our previous sessions. But on the client side, we're going to implement these using React Framework. So, for example, we used useEffect to render once all of our items. And we used Axios library to issue a GET request to the Node.js backend and collect a response that would indicate all of the different tasks that we want to put in our planner. And yeah, so that was a really good operation. And then we also did create, which was to add items. So we had this function that was another Axios request, and we called it add item. And basically, you can see a lot of logic here going on for React. So actually, I'm going to make this a little bit larger so you all can see better. I wanted to call to your attention the line where we do our post request. So first, we are actually passing in two different things to axios.post. We're passing in the route that is localhost 3001/items. That's going to be where we can get those resources. That's the endpoint on the Node.js side. And we also pass in a dictionary object, which has the new item that we want to post, in other words, send to the backend. And so, yeah, that's basically how we are going to move our post request. Then we also update the items on our side here by saying set items. And set items, remember, is part of our use state hook. So we're actually updating the value of items with this function. And we just write a list which has items and new item object. So it's going to then update the value of our list. And then we have another use state functional component here, set new item, and our function object. And this is our setter for the new item state. So we return that state to an empty string. Right. Our next aspect here is update. And in update, it was a little more complicated. We actually ended up having to put an if statement where I'm actually going to hide myself briefly here. We ended up putting in an if statement where you can see the logic is item ID equals ID. Therefore, you would update the item and to the new item specified. And so you can kind of see the if else statement here because then otherwise item would just be equal to itself. And so this is how we do updates is, you have to consider two possible cases, whether there's a change or not, right? And so then I wanted to bring to your attention the last one, which is delete. And in this method here, I want to talk about asynchronous functions. And so we have an asynchronous function here, as we have for all of our CRUD operations. I'll add myself back in here. And asynchronous functions, there was a question about last session, so I wanted to make sure I covered it in this session as well. And the question was, what are asynchronous functions? Why do we need to use them? And so you can tell from this delete item method that we are doing an Axios request, an HTTP request, delete in particular. And in order for that to complete, we need to wait for the Node.js server to respond. And that can take some time. So we want to write an await keyword next to the delete request because that will indicate to JavaScript that it should not move on to set the items and update those values until it hears back from the Node.js server. If we didn't put in this asynchronous call, JavaScript would not necessarily wait. It would try to be really efficient and execute all of the commands below our request. Like, oh, while we're waiting for that request, let's update the items. This one says, is Ajax still used for asynchronous? I believe so. I believe people still use Ajax, but I'm not really super familiar with Ajax. So I wouldn't be the best person to ask, unfortunately. Maybe someone in the chat is an Ajax user, and I could be able to comment. But all right, so if there's any questions, by the way, about any of these CRUD operations, let me know. But yeah, for now, we're going to move on to the front end design, which was where we implement our component architecture. And so the return for the app is a function that holds the page outline. And so this is really the backbone of our front end architecture. It's showing the header, which is the H1 tag, the largest thing in the Hack Planner. It's this big title that comes up right at you. And we have our list. So we have the UL class checklist items that's going to store the unordered list. UL stands for unordered list of tasks that we have for the hackathon. And then, we're going to build a map which will map every single item in our database to its own list element. And that's what's happening in these curly braces here. Then there's a remind button, edit button, delete button, all the things we need in order to be able to update the entries in our project. And then we have a button and a field in our add form division at the very bottom, which are going to be actually changing the list by adding new entries. And we built all the CRUD operations on the front end to handle these changes. All right. And so we copied the styles.css from our Flask app by going into the index.css file of React and pasting in styles.css from Flask. It's actually the same exact language, CSS, and it's totally compatible with both Flask framework and React framework. So I recommend going in and copying those. And as we saw in our Global Hack Week today and Global Hack Week stream about an hour ago, we had some really great submissions to DevPost on our Hack Planner, and one in particular, which was really cool, pink one with some extra features. So all of you have been doing an amazing job styling your projects and even adding features that go above and beyond what we did in this workshop. So really, I'm super impressed with all of your progress so far, and definitely keep that up. So as we finish up with our front end React framework for day 3 recap, let's move on to backend, which was all with Node.js. So first we imported our libraries, and one of the libraries we needed was Express.js. And Express.js is a tool that is used to handle that interface between React and Node. So we need that. And then we also have several other packages like SQLite 3, which is a database package, CORS, which hopefully some of you might remember from last time, or stands for Cross Origin Resource Sharing, which is a great middleware for your full stack project. We had SGMail, which was just what we called it, but actually it's the SendGrid mail package. And then we had .env, which is used to help us load our environmental variables into the project and keep our project secure. So these are the basic libraries that we imported. And we used .env to load those. We started up our Express server. I actually am not sure if we went over this last time. Yeah, we may have caught up to our day 4. I should have put like a little marker here because I think I've just been going through them. But maybe I'll slow down actually a little bit because I think we didn't get to this part yet. Anybody in the chat confirm whether we got here? Does any of this look familiar? I think actually we stopped last time. I don't think we even got to the CRUD operations. Maybe we got to one CRUD operation, but hopefully that's not too fast for you. Let me know if it is. God says, yeah, and this is a really good point by Gaming Skull, which is that we were using Flask, which is Python, so there's no async function that you need to explicitly call in Python. But for JavaScript, yes, you need to use that. So actually, let's back up a little bit. I think I went too fast, unfortunately. Yeah, because we did not really cover a lot of this stuff last time. And I see that in my Visual Studio Code, it's actually not implemented. So let's go ahead and implement all this stuff in our Visual Studio Code editor. Just give me a minute while I pull up this editor. Yeah, so you all might remember this a little bit from last time. This is as far as we got in our previous session. We did do our read function, which is part of the CRUD operations, and we did actually get to that last time, but we did not implement our create, update, or delete. So let's do that now. We'll start with our create, and create is going to be a way for us to add new entries to the database and display those on the screen. So let's try and do that. All right, and I see actually that the slides are a little bit stuck from this, I think. Oh no, I think they're all right. Let's see. We're in CRUD client side. Yes. So we are showing our add item. Yeah. So we've already done fetch items. So let's go ahead and add a new method, which will be called add item. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. Going a little too fast for us today. Just, I guess, excited to go ahead and get started with all of you, but we will wait now for everyone to catch up. So we're actually on slide 94. I'll put that in the chat. So slide 94 contains the code for doing our create operation. We did do fetch last time. And so just to review of what we did last time, with our fetch, we went ahead and did a try catch statement. So we tried to wait for the GET request to complete to our backend at the items endpoint. And at that endpoint, we're going to eventually create a way to retrieve the data from the database with this GET request. But for now, actually, it doesn't exist yet. But then once we retrieve all that data, we're going to set the value of our item state into response.data. So on a response that we receive from our server, there's actually a lot of different information. There's metadata, that of various kinds, but we actually want to get the actual data package, in other words, the body of the request. And so that's why we do .data. We select the data attribute from our response object, and we use the setter function to update our item state according to that. So that's why we do set items response.data here in line 17. And just in case this doesn't work for whatever reason, we catch the error and we return it to the console. And that's what we're doing here in console.error. So this is a review from last time. But now we're going to move on and do add item, which is a different, it's an entirely different function. So for add item, we're going to start with our, just give me 1 second. We're going to start with our response object, just like we did with fetch items. And we have to do an await command because this is a promise. And we're going to request that from our Node.js server. You can tell it's the Node.js server because we're going to host that on the 3001 port. So that's really great. And then we have the items path that specifies we're looking at items, right? But the difference between post and get is that in the post request, we're, in addition to trying to receive data, we're actually also going to send data. And so we can send a object. We will send a dictionary object that says item, and then it will specify that the value of this item we're sending is new item. So this could just be something that the user wants to add to the list. Like, let's say you want to add a new task. And remember, in JavaScript, you have to put these semicolons. If you don't remember the semicolons, you can get yourself in trouble. And I've definitely done that before. So remember, especially since we're transitioning from Python to JavaScript. All right. Second is going to be our new item object. So we will type new item obj, and we're going to create this dictionary, which will contain the response.data.id. So this is the ID of the task. And we will also put item new item. So that will serve as the value that we associate with such an ID. Okay. The next step is to use our setter function to update the state of items. So we will type set items, and we'll give an argument, which is going to be our original items and our new item object, which is newly available for us to use. So finally, we will set new item to be equal to an empty string, because we want to now once again reset our new item state and make sure that the program knows we were able to successfully put that in there, and now we're going to update back to a zero, an empty string. All right. So next we're going to do a catch statement. So hopefully we won't have any errors, but in case we do, we want to be able to know where that error is coming from. So that's why we type error adding item to tell the user that that's where we had the problem. And then we'll print out the error. So here is our add item endpoint here. Or I guess asynchronous function. And so that's what we're doing there. So now we're going to move on to our update function. And actually this is, I'm glad that I realized that we didn't cover this yesterday, because it's actually kind of complicated. So we're going to go through it step by step. All right. So for this function, and hopefully you all can see here, on the screen. We're actually now no longer in slide 94, we're on slide 95. So I'll put this down. And for this function, we're going to be calling it edit item. And it will be, once again, an asynchronous function. For this one, actually, we want to pass in the ID, the updated item, and we're going to now build another try-catch statement. I'll even just build it right now. Maybe we'll do the catch statement first. That's pretty easy to do. Just do exactly what we did last time. And we'll move on to our actual try here. And so we're going to build another Axios request. We're going to wait for this to happen. And I'm actually going to use a put because we had some questions last time about put versus post. So this time I'm just going to use a put for our update. And does anybody in the chat know the difference between a post request and a put request? But by the way, it's totally okay to use either a put request or a post request to update a record. They're both legitimate ways of doing so. But yeah, if anyone in the chat knows the difference between a post request and a put request, feel free to let us know. While you're doing that, I'm going to put the path for our request up on the screen. Remember that we can specifically route to a ID of our choosing. So this path is slightly different than our previous ones, where we were either posting or getting from the items endpoint or a path. Excuse me. This time we are actually putting to a items / a particular ID path. So we can now customize our path a little bit more. And we're going to pass in as well a dictionary object containing our item. Yes, and Gaming's goal is correct. Put will reproduce the same result. Post will create it multiple times. And actually, I think there is there's a pretty simple guide on Mozilla that tells you the difference between these. So I'm going to actually paste that into the chat. Maybe I'll add it to our slide as well. I might add it to the slide notes, or no, I'll just paste it in. This is a really great resource if you're studying for a technical interview, or if you are trying to learn more for your own personal project. But yeah, these HTTP request methods, there's quite a few, and we're only scratching the surface of them. And so with post also, we not only send information to the server, but we receive information back. And so that's another major difference between put and post. Okay, so let's continue along with our programming. Don't forget your semicolon. And we are going to create a new variable called updated items. And it's going to consist of a map of each item. And we're going to trigger this conditional within our map. And the conditional is as follows. You may not be familiar with this notation, but it's a JavaScript notation. So um, this condition is a strict equals. So we're asking if the two items are the same. And then we're saying if, and then in this case, we can specify, well, in that case, we want to change the value of item to be every item except this new one, which is going to be updated item. So we're actually altering our list. Which makes sense, right? Because we do want to update the record which has the ID that we specify. However, if the ID is not the same as the one we specify, we want to leave that ID be, right? So we will just type item in that case, right? And that is the map that we have to sort of update the records according to our specifications. And then finally, we will set the items state to be equal to updated items. That's a good one for that. The next slide we have is for delete. And so you'll want to go to slide 96 to follow along for this one. But this method we will call delete item. And we need the ID also for delete item because it doesn't specify, it does want to specify which item to delete, right? We don't want to just delete the most recent item or a random item. And so we're going to use a similar logic where we have to actually filter through all of our results to find out which item has the same item ID. And so we'll start with a try catch so that we can try and catch the error. We're gonna write our error statement again first. I kind of like doing that. I don't know why. Maybe I like getting it out of the way first. But we are going to await for the Axios delete request at the following path on our backend. The same path you might notice that we had in our put request. However, the main difference is going to be that we are not passing information to the server. So we're not passing any new information in. We are just sending the request to this path, and then the endpoint will execute on the server. And so we can then say that we want to go to set items, which is our setter function, and it will update the values in our front end. And we can say items.filter. We want to filter the items and say that we want to have it such that the item ID is not equal to ID. And why do we do it this way? Well, we are trying to get a list of every item such that it is not the same as the one we want to delete. And that will basically update our item state to delete that entry for all intents and purposes on the user's side. And we're sending this delete request to the backend to update that on the database side. Okay. So we're kind of doing everything twice in a sense. We have to do things on the front end and we have to do them on the back end. It's a little bit asynchronous, as they say, and that's why we have these asynchronous functions to sort of handle that situation. All right. So if anyone has any questions, by the way, feel free to ask those in the chat. That would be totally okay. But for now, let's move on to our front end design, and this is where things get a little interesting. So we want to change out this return statement that already exists here with one that's a little bit more relevant to our hack planner. So we used to have this template that comes with every React project. It just says, oh, hey, here's how you can learn React. But we want to delete that entire thing. And we're going to replace it with our very own front-end architecture. So we're going to start by putting everything in a container. That's going to let us style the container. And we'll use a h1 tag, just like we did last time, to indicate that we have, this title. We want to put a UL, which stands for unordered list. It's called checklist items. And we're going to create a map where we say that we want to map each item onto a list element. And the list will have a key, which will be equal to the item ID. And then it will span several different things. So, well, we want to put the item first, the actual value of item. Then we want to put a button, which will be our remind button class. And on click will tell us that when we click this button, we want to edit the item. So this is actually our edit item button, but I just have it such that it's using the same styling as the remind button. You're welcome to update yours and have your own special style for this. Got a little bit messed up here, it seems. Yeah, curly brace. Edit there. That's our edit button. We want another button for our delete item. So we can do that as well. Call that delete, just like we did last time. And finally, we'll have our remind button. This is nothing new from our first application when we built this in Flask. The only new thing is that we're doing this in the React framework instead of the Flask framework. So things are a little bit different. So yeah, now we can put a new division for our add form, which is exactly what we did last time. And we're saying that if there's a change to this input field, we want to trigger the setter function for new item state. So we want to actually set the value of new item to the target of this field. And then we're going to have a button which we can trigger with an on-click event listener. And we'll call this button add. And that will trigger the function add item, which we've already written. Okay, so this is a pretty simple front end. It's not anything too crazy, but and it's actually something we've already built before, but it will work for our purposes. And it actually has a lot of complexity built into it, like add item, delete item, set reminder. These are pretty complex functions that we've created. And so they'll just trigger really nicely when we're done building this application. Okay, so then the other thing was to copy the styles. So I actually have the styles pulled up from our previous workshop. And yeah, these are the styles that we had for the different classes and the different tags. And so I'm going to actually copy those, and we're going to scroll down to our index.css, and we just select all and we just paste it here. All we need to do. That will change the styles on our project. So I won't spend too much time on this front end stuff because it's actually all the same as what we did in our first workshop parts. But now I want to move on to the back end, which is Node.js. And before I do that, I'll just stop to see if there's any uh, questions. And yes, as is mentioned, you can use class name actually is actually probably better practice for React. And can we use Tailwind in the project to submit? Sure, I have no problem with that. Go ahead. And yeah, if you need to submit something past the submission date, it seems like maybe the Hack Planner, because we have this fourth part, it makes sense to not have been able to submit. So maybe just request with the team, the Global Hack Week organizers. I actually don't know whether you could submit it now or not, but yeah, we'd love to see your projects. So that would be awesome to see. Oh yeah, yeah. So I'm just gonna actually delete that because we don't even use that class. But yeah, that's a very good catch. We can definitely use class name. I think actually both will work for React these days, but it is definitely better to use class name. The reason they do that is because class also means something else in React. Yeah, I don't think we need to. I don't think there's any other classes, but if anybody can see them, let me know. I'll update that in the GitHub as well. I kind of just pasted this in from our previous one. Thanks everybody for being so on top of it here in our project. Okay, so now we're going to be changing a little bit here, switching up, and we're going to be going to our backend, which is all Node.js. Okay. So let me go back to the slides, and actually on the slides we are on slide number, let's see, 102. So I'm going to present slide number 102. Someone says, would learning React before taking my JS class make learning JS harder? I don't think so, because actually React is a JavaScript, is a framework that works with JavaScript. So it's a good practice to learn about React. It gives you a real world application of JavaScript. So I think that's totally fine. And yeah, let's double check this this search. We can see if there's any more classes. I don't think there are. I think it's just these three. Thank you for catching that, everybody. And yeah, now I'm going to present our slides. So in these slides, I'm going to navigate to slide 102. I have a little bit of information for the backend for us to add. But before we get to the backend, actually, I think we will take a quick 5-minute break, and then we will come back for the backend. So I will see you all then. right. Hi, everybody. I hope you had a good break. It's always good to take a little break and stretch your legs and, um, yeah, make sure that you're taking care of yourself during this Global Hack Week. And that's the best way to learn, too. So, anyway, let's go and move on to our backend, which is going to be all with Node.js framework. So, we talked about Node.js a little bit at the beginning, but this is a really great way for serving web applications. And to start, we need to import some libraries. So we're going to go into our code base and try that out. Let's try it out now. Now, we're not going to be writing any of this backend stuff in our app.js file because this is part of our React project. I'm sorry, not that. I guess I didn't quite do this yet in this project. Let me switch my my screen here really quickly. Yeah, so let's create a new file here, just for now. It'll be our server.js file. This will be where we have our Node.js backend. So we're going to first start out by requiring our libraries, which are going to be Express, SQLite3, Cores, SendGrid, and .env. So let's go ahead and write those out. Require is just the way that we import dependencies with JavaScript. This verbose keyword, it just means that we ask for a full stack trace through that database. Okay, so those are all of the libraries that we import. And in order to get the environmental variable files, we will use .env.config. That will load the environment variables from our .env file. And so that's going to be really useful when we need to access our API key from SendGrid. The next step is for us to set up our Express server. And so we're going to create a new variable called app. And this is really similar to what we did in Flask, actually, where we had this app object that we played around with. And it's going to be a Express. And we're going to define the port to be 3001. That's going to match the path that we chose for our front end as well. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is include our middlewares. And so the first middleware we're going to add is express.json. The second one we're going to add is Cores. And I wanted to take a quick detour to show you all what are these middlewares. This is kind of important, really. So middlewares are sort of these interfaces that allow the information to be sent around the application. So express.json is sending JSON information across the application. And Cores is allowing you to access resources in one part of the application that originate from another. So these middlewares are really helping us in our project. And so that's why they're important to import and use. So now we're going to add in the final line here, which is app.listen. And this is going to actually start up our app for us. So it's a really important step. And we're going to first include the port that we want the app to be residing on. And then we're going to include this logic here, which is just going to log that the server is running. This lets the developer know that their code is working. Okay? So these are the backbone of the server. And so now we're going to include our database management. And so this is really similar to what we did in Flask. We'll create a DB variable. It's going to host a new SQL Lite 3 database object, and we'll call it data.db. We could also call it checklist.db like we did in the Flask project. That's totally okay. But now we're going to use the serialize method, which ensures that this portion of SQL code runs serially, meaning it runs before the next one, because we definitely want to create a table if it doesn't exist. Our items, we're going to do the same exact integer primary key, auto increment, all that same stuff we did last time in our Flask application. And if you don't remember why we do integer primary key auto increment, refer back to our previous sessions and our text item. And so, yeah, that's how we create the new table. And remember that we have to now do all of our CRUD operations, but on the back end. So let's start with create. And create, if you remember, is a post request. So we are going to write the endpoint for this request. So in JavaScript, we write it a little bit differently. You can see we have these two variables. Request is REQ and response is RES. It's telling us what we are going to do with our request and our response. The first thing we're going to do is define an item variable, which is going to store the body of our request. So we're expecting that the front end is going to give us some kind of request, and that the body of that is going to be whatever new stuff we want to add. Okay, so next step is, oh, actually, I should not have a parenthesis there. Okay, so we actually want to put that here. And so the next step is we're going to run a SQL statement. The SQL statement is going to be insert into. And so we're going to insert this item into our database. And then we have an error handling block here where we can actually set the response. So if there's an error, we can send the error message using our response. And this is why it's great to use post requests, because we can actually see if our insert was successful. And then otherwise, we will just return the ID of the item. So this is basically how we can build a post endpoint, post request endpoint on our Node.js server. So that's for create. And if you all just have any doubts about that, let me let you know that the slides for this, they start at 109. So if you go to slide 109, you can start with these CRUD operations. The second is our read slide, our read endpoint. And so let's go on to that next. For our read, we're going to have items path also. And once again, we are going to do a get request. So we're going to use a select statement, just like we did in our Flask framework. The exact same response. So we can tell the user whether or not it was successful. Of course, yeah, I mean, the get request executing successfully is going to tell the user that it worked. So we're going to say else we'll just put the rows of the database as a JSON object as our response. Okay, so that's it for our read. Next is we're going to do our update. And so this is saying that, well, if you get a put on the ID path, then we will have a ID variable that will take the ID from the request and a new item variable that will take the body from the request. And with those two new variables defined, we will run on the database a update statement. So this is our SQL statement. It's an update statement, and it says to update the items. And we'll set the item equal to new item, where the ID equals item ID. And so let's put that logic in. And one more thing I wanted to add is our error handler. So if we have an error, then we will return a 500 status and the error message, log the error message. But if not, then we will send 200 to indicate that the item was updated. And so once again, because this is a put, we're not really sending information back. We're just saying, yep, this status is 200. So we did not get any error. Okay. We have one more CRUD operation to implement, and that's our delete operation. For this, we're going to use the same exact path as we used for our update operation. And we have our ID we need for the delete statement just as well as we needed for our update. And instead of running an update statement, though, we're going to run a delete statement. So we just type delete from items where the ID is equal to our ID, one we got from the user. We use the exact same error handling, actually exactly the same message as we used for delete. Okay. So now it's time for, actually, I'm going to wait for our demo because I don't want to run out of time. So we'll wait to have our demo until the very end. I just want to move directly on to our SendGrid API, which is the next section. And so for those of you who were able to join for last time, this is slide 114 on the slide deck. And we are going to be implementing the same exact API that we did in the previous session. So the only difference, though, is that this time in your integration, you're going to click on the Node.js technology or Node.js framework. So when you go into this link, you should be able to log into SendGrid and follow the instructions for integrating with Node.js, and maybe I'll actually follow along. So let's go ahead and follow along. 9, 14. Okay, and let me share my screen and show you all. Yeah, so now we have a great instruction here for how to send email using Node.js. Let me share that with you. So first, you want to make sure you have Node.js installed, which we do. Then we'll create our API key, and we'll store it in environmental variables, exactly like we did for our Flask application. So you can actually just copy and paste the environmental variables file from your Flask project if you still have it. And that's actually another benefit of using the env file, which was a question before. Hey, why should I use env files? Well, now if you want to redevelop your application in a new framework, you could easily just use the same exact env file. And we've already done this where we installed the SendGrid package, and then we needed to send our first email, which is just given here as a code example. And remember, you want to change to your verified sender. So you want to make sure that this from becomes whatever your verified sender is. And I actually have that stored as an environmental variable for myself. But you're welcome to use your own. And then whatever recipient you're going to be able to use to test this out. So go ahead and test out the SendGrid API if you want before implementing it in the project. But at this time, we're gonna go ahead and implement it. So let me show that to you. So we're back in our project, and we're moving on to implement the email reminder. So for this, we want to start by putting on the app.js file a new function. So we already have all these other asynchronous functions. We want to add a new one called setReminder. And setReminder is going to take an ID of an item because we want to be able to reference it in our reminder. So we want to be able to tell the user, hey, you're reminded. And then when they say, hey, what am I reminded of? We want to be able to tell them, oh, you need to go do XYZ. So that's why we request the ID, so that it's not just a blanket remind statement, which could be kind of useless. So now let's build our try catch. Always good to put a try catch for error handling, which is super important. And in our try statement, we're going to put items.find, locate the item corresponding to our ID. That's basically what this .find method is doing. So we're retrieving this item from the task list. Then afterwards, we will define another variable called confirmed. And we're going to say window.confirm reminder plus item.item. So what this is doing is putting one of those confirm windows that you get when they pop up in your browser and it says okay. And so we wanna make sure the user sees this reminder. So we put a confirm window that pops up in the browser and asks them to say hit OK. And the reminder text is customized to have exactly the item that we're referring to. So that's why we do this find statement. That's why we accept an ID, is to customize that reminder message that pops up. Okay. So now we want another, now we want another thing to trigger when we do our reminder. And just like we did with Flask, we want this to actually trigger our email to send as well. So we're going to build in an await HTTP request where we do a post to our backend, our Node.js backend, and we're gonna actually specify a new path, which is going to be the send email path. And when we go to the send email path, we're going to put a bunch of logic on that. So that'll be really good. And we can actually send information with post. So let's send the item. Have already super conveniently item.item. Okay. Oh, I haven't been doing my semicolons. Sorry about that, everybody. I always forget to do my semicolons because we're in JavaScript world. But important to remember. And so now the next thing for us to do is we want to go back to our map where we mapped all of our items and just verify that we have our set reminder function here. So when we click on our remind button, it should send us to this set reminder function. And hey, now we have that defined. So actually now all of these functions are defined in our file. Super, super good. So thanks for the session. Thanks for joining Gaming School. Take care. Okay, so now that we've done that, we want to go ahead and move to the backend, which is our server.js file. So on the backend, we want to put our post request. And we used to have this items post request. So I'm actually going to copy that and paste it just so that we have something to work with. Instead of posting to the items path, we want to have a case where we would post to the send email path. Okay, so I'm going to delete this database thing because we're not actually updating any database in this endpoint. What we are going to do is build an email to send to a user. Okay, so for example, we need a subject. So I'm just going to say that the subject is the reminder itself, because that'll be really good for the user to see that right away. And in the body, I'll pretty much just write the same thing. This is a reminder for the task. Oh, I see what happened here. Okay. And so now that we've done that, we want to use SendGrid to make an API connection. So we're going to set the API key to our SendGrid API key. Okay. And we want to add a message variable. It's going to be a dictionary of all of our different things. So this is the recipient that I have. You can put your own recipient, or you're welcome to send it to my Proton Mail account. I don't know if I'll check it though. So you might not ever know if your email actually sent. But then we'll have our from, our subject, and finally our text, which is going to be the email body. Okay. So now we have this implemented. One thing that actually we did not include were these variables, these reminder email and SendGrid API key. I actually never did that. So let me do that now. I'm going to actually copy them from the GitHub repository and paste them at the top. So I'll add those into our slides so that you all can see. This is coming from, by the way, our .env dependency, which allowed us to easily import these variables from our env file. So then after we establish our connection with the API, we can send. So we're going to do the send method, and we're sending that message. Then we are going to ask to send as a response the status 200, which indicates a success. And we're going to catch any errors, which is always a good thing to do. Error handling is something that all professional software developers want to do. It makes it really easy not just for you to debug your project, but also for anyone else who uses it, updates it in the future. Okay. So now we're going to do a demo of this project. And actually, I'll show you how to do that in your terminal. So let me open up my terminal. So here it is. Navigate to the directory that you have your project in, and you'll want to type npm space start. That's going to start the React side of your project. Actually, maybe first start the Node.js side of your project. So let me do that first. So you want to type in the term node.server.js. Sorry. I think I just presented the same one twice. Yeah, here it is. So in your terminal, you type node server.js. I'll put it in the chat as well. And it should just give you this error, this message: server is running on port 3001. All right. And then we will go to our React, which this is probably a better order to do it in, right? Doesn't really matter, but this way that when the front end, it usually directs you right to your Google Chrome browser. So we want it to be ready for us to work. And when you do that, remember you needed 2 different terminals for that. It'll direct you to the Hack Planner. So there's our Hack Planner. And this is exactly the same one that we had in our Flask framework. You can't see it, but it's sending me a reminder just like the Flask one did. It's sending me an email address, and I can add in a new one, like conceptualize a new project idea. I'll add right in. Delete coffee, because that's not actually a maybe that is. Take a coffee break, right? You want to remind yourself to do that. So yeah, this is our project, but now in a new framework. So it looks almost exactly the same as it did before. Right, so hopefully seeing this in 2 different frameworks was helpful for you to really get a handle on endpoints, routing, differences between front end and back end. What are the key components of a project? I'm just going to move us to the summary now. With this quiz, I want to actually see if any of you can answer any of these questions. So on line 1, on slide 121, we have our quiz. So the first one is, what is the difference between a path, a route, and an endpoint? Does anybody know what any of these are? All right, so I'll actually give you a hint here. So path is the address that you're going to. So, for example, that send email path. And route is actually how the information is being directed to that path. So we're saying, let's direct information to this path. It could be in the form of a GET request or a POST request. And then the endpoint is actually the logic that's happening at when that information gets there. So you can use a route and you can define an endpoint for with some logic in it to trigger once that information is routed. So name one example of an HTTP request. Maybe someone can do this. This would be a really, we actually dealt with quite a few different HTTP requests during this workshop. All right, so we had GET request and POST request and PUT request and DELETE request. Those were the four that we worked with today. The next one is name an example of a middleware that we used in this workshop. Does anybody remember any middlewares that we used? This is kind of a tricky one. You'd have to have a really good memory. All right, so one example was CORS we used in this workshop. And yeah, something about a JSON. That's right, Bytehead. We used express.json. Express.json. Okay. And what does NPM stand for? Does anybody remember what NPM stands for? Node Package Manager, that's right. So Bytehead gets that one as well. Nice job. And I think this is my very last one. What is a decorator in Python? Nice. The one I know is Node Package Manager. That's right. Excellent. And so decorator is actually a function wrapper. So it adds additional features on top of an existing function. So we use this to route our view function, associate our view function with a particular path. Right? And actually a particular endpoint. So in the summary, I just wanted to say we built a checklist app. We had a backend, a Flask backend with HTTP requests, database interactions. We did our CRUD operations. We integrated Flask with templates. And with React and Node.js, our summary is that we can use React and Node.js together for development, and that we have a dynamic UI that we can update with our React component architecture. And we used Axios to communicate and send requests from our front end to the back end. So it says, if we wanted a Flask backend with React, it would be similar, right? So Flask sort of comes with its own front end. But I think, yeah, in theory, you could use both. Yeah, in theory, you could use both. Yeah, it would be very similar. That's a good question because, yeah, you just need to have a way to handle requests that are coming from the front end on the back end. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's Node.js or any other technology. And so, yeah, we learned a lot of different things. Some of these things were actually things I thought we would get to, but unfortunately, sometimes you overestimate what you're able to cover. But maybe next time we will try a few of these, including performance optimization and some security measure stuff. Authentication stuff is things we didn't really get to, but that's for next time. We'll get to that next time. So thank you so much for the comment, Shem Murray. I'm so glad that you learned something. And actually, we have a few different. I wanted to just link you to a few of my other repositories, which I have one that focuses more on React and one that focuses more on Flask. So you're welcome to check those out. But anyway, until next time, take care. Thank you all for joining. Happy Hack Week.